And good morning. Very interesting presentation here. I have to say it's a beautiful morning here. We had the blue moon. That was full moon of interesting things going on, but it was a cool start, or it is a cool start of the day. I saw 36 in Grayling this morning, most areas in the 40s. So it's a relatively cool start, but as we will see here in a couple of minutes, there is a distinct trend in our forecast, and it's towards the warmer. And probably drier as well. We'll get there in just a moment. A couple things though, looking at the past week, as many of you know, especially those in the southern part of the state, we had a major severe weather outbreak last Thursday at the very end of our heat wave, which also impacted really only the southern areas of the state. And again, it had to do with that very unusual air mass with high humidities, but many reports of almost too many to mention for high wind damage, and 7 tornadoes occurred on Thursday night. That is, at least by preliminary standards, that's a record for the month of August in Michigan, something we don't see very often. A couple of those were strong tornadoes, including one here in the local area that moved right along I-96 and caused significant damage. Those are the red triangles you can see in the map here. You can also see really pretty well the spatial pattern of where some of the greatest damage was observed. The blue are all high wind reports. Couple spots had large hail, but by and large, most of the really significant issues were associated with high winds, down trees, down power lines. Almost 500,000 customers without power, some still without power even now. So it was a huge outage in terms of Michigan, and there was unfortunately widespread property damage and even a couple fatalities, unfortunately. But if you look at if you see the damage from the tornado that occurred here just south of the area, you'd have to conclude, given how extensive it was and severe it was, it's a miracle that more people weren't hurt. But again, it was, for Michigan standards, this was a big one. And I think the lesson here is we're not Oklahoma or the Panhandle of Texas in terms of the frequency of severe weather, but it does occur. And when we do get the warnings, we just have to remember these things can happen. It was a significant event by any standard. For the statistics here on the left-hand side are mean temperatures, and these follow where that hot, humid air made it last week. They range from almost 5 degrees cooler than normal across northern and northeastern parts of the state to a couple degrees warmer than normal in the far southwest, which is where the warm air made it during the middle of the week. So very strong gradient across the state. Precipitation, most of the heaviest precipitation fell across the eastern half of lower Michigan, especially the southeast. You can see here on the right-hand side, some areas, again, picking up more than 4, 5, even 6 inches of rain. So very wet conditions. And of course, this comes on the heels of other heavy rainfall during the season. Now, note, if you move westward here into the western and southwestern lower peninsula, some areas had very little, even no precipitation for the entire week. So it's been they're drying off there again relatively quickly. But for the southeastern part of the state, it has been an extraordinarily wet late summer. And continues so, although our forecast is suggesting some changes coming up here. Last week, we talked about the high combination of high heat and humidity. This is from last week, and people ask, well, what's the highest heat index temperature, which again is a measure of how hot it feels. It's important for people, also for livestock during these conditions. And we had some heat index values last week that exceeded 110, which doesn't happen very often. Well, we've been doing some looking at records. Now, this is not exhaustive, but and remember, we can only do this when we have hourly values or less or more frequent here. So it does cut down the number of sites that we have. But we did some searching and looked at the climatology of this, and really looking over the last 50 years or so, we found, and I have to, and I can't remember who it was that said it was 123, and it was at Benton Harbor, and it was in 1999. They were spot on. So 3 cheers to you for knowing that 123 is the highest value that we could find. Note also that it also well, 123 did occur both at Kalamazoo, and I've put Toledo in here for our friends in Monroe County, or just on the border there. But note timing of this, that, well, the one of the records is from late July of '99. All the other three top events here, and this is also true at other parts of the state, you tend to see lower values of heat index temperatures as you go north. That's not a surprise, but the highest values, many of them did occur in that big heat wave in the middle of July back in 1995. That was the one that led to over 600 fatalities in Chicago. That was the same one. That's one of the worst heat waves that we've had here in the upper Midwest in a long time. And that shows up in these statistics. So again, if you're wondering how high does it get, well, low 120s is top end for Michigan. And as you go north, typically down in the 110 to 115 range by the time you get to the northern lower and to upper Michigan. So where are we headed here? Well, I mentioned warm and dry, and that's the theme. Left-hand side here, this is the jet stream forecast here next week. And you can see once again ridging across much of the central and eastern U.S., southwesterly flow aloft, troughing out west. On the right-hand side here, these are projected temperature anomalies, how far one way above or below normal. And you can see large areas here under that ridge. This is Meteorology 101, are going to be warmer than normal. So we're definitely headed in that direction. It's going to be noticeable here over the next few days. This morning, though, I mentioned we've got a Canadian air mass over the top of us, and for a change, very little no smoke from forest fires in it. It's just a gorgeous day, but it will be a couple degrees warmer than yesterday. We were only in the upper 60s across much of the state yesterday, and as this high, you will see in our forecasters, very little color here on the map to speak of, very few weather systems. Here's the map tomorrow morning. The high pushes off to the east. We will start to get return flow out of the southwest here beginning late tomorrow, and certainly on Saturday. A warm front approaches here. That actually passes through on Saturday, but there's no moisture. There's almost no moisture for these weather systems to work with. So while we will see a few clouds maybe on Saturday, otherwise we are talking clear to mostly sunny skies during the day with a very, very noticeable warming. So today our high temperatures looking at low maybe to mid 70s, so a few degrees warmer than yesterday. Tomorrow we'll do a few degrees better than that, upper 70s to near 80. And then by Saturday we should go probably into the low and mid 80s. And then after especially after that warm front passes on Saturday with a few clouds, we should see upper 80s and low 90s by Sunday and continue there into the early part of next week. You will also notice, especially by the late weekend, an increase in humidity. So it will be nothing like what we saw a week ago in the southern part of the state, but still pretty uncomfortable. We will have heat index temperatures probably up in the 90s to maybe near 100. It's going to be hot. So we'll call it a hot and humid for the first half, at least, of next week. You'll also notice no colors on these maps, no precipitation essentially expected. There's a chance, again, of a few clouds on Saturday. Next chance for any rain, I think, probably not coming until later on Wednesday or Thursday of next week, as it looks right now. And a little upper wave, upper trough moves through the area once again. But in general, the direction certainly is pointing towards warmer and drier than normal. Here's our Saturday forecast. Again, you can see it actually has a little tiny bit of green up here. But even if there is precipitation, it's going to be sprinkles or basically just trace amounts. So for forecast precipitation totals through next Thursday, you can see most of the state less than 1/4 inch. And if this occurs, that would be what is anticipated for, again, the latter part of next week, way out at the end. But we're basically looking at almost a completely dry week here, looking ahead. For potential evapotranspiration rates, the reference values, I put this in here. It's late in the season, but given that forecast of warmer and drier than normal, sunny skies and warming surface temperatures, we will see elevated or higher than normal water demands here over the upcoming week. And in some parts of the state where we haven't gotten nearly as much precipitation, watering and irrigation continues. It will be a high water demand week for those late maturing crops. So something to keep an eye on for this time of the year again, because we will be looking at daily rates often exceeding 0.2 of an inch, especially across the southern part of the state. And in our medium range forecast time frame here, not a real surprise given what you just saw, but our jet stream pattern still suggesting ridging over the central and eastern part of North America. And again, not surprisingly at all, a large area of warmer than normal conditions expected over the same area, including Michigan. Now, the precipitation forecast here, you can see officially for Michigan, it's near normal, the equal odds scenario. If I would have made this forecast, I would have probably put us in the drier than normal. And that's actually, if you look at the 8 to 14 day time frame right after this, going into that second week of September, that's what it suggests. So my personal view on this is warmer and drier than normal is a pretty strong bet, especially the temperatures. That's a very, very, very high probability. So a couple things to think about. It means after some cooler than normal weather across many parts of the state here over the last several weeks, we probably are going to be flip-flopped and be warmer than normal. That should help some of the crops that are lagging behind a little bit or have lagged behind in terms of phenology. It also means that we're going to pick up some degree days, and maybe September ends up, especially given the first part of the month, maybe being warmer than normal. The outlook, remember from last week, was no direction on mean temperatures, but for drier than normal conditions during September. So wrapping up here, again, a very straightforward forecast, fair, and if you, I didn't mention it, an important one. If you're going to the home opener here at Spartan Stadium tomorrow night, I don't think you could come up with a much better forecast. Beautiful conditions, temperatures in the probably around 73 or 74, clear skies, a little bit of a southerly breeze. It'll be outstanding. Just perfect weather for a football game tomorrow night. We'll hope that team takes care of business here. But if you're coming, the weather couldn't be a better match. With that, I am going to transition and introduce next week's speaker on the 7th of the next Thursday morning, 7th of September, Jonathan Laporte, who's our MSU Extension Farm Business Management educator, is going to be with us to talk about marketing. And a little bit of change of pace here. So that is next Thursday. And with that, I'm going to hand it back off here to Phil. Thanks.